I tend to forget to record, so thanks for bearing with me. I always want to make sure I'm recording. Great, so welcome today. Today we're talking about mental health strategies for the nonprofit workplace. This is number 2 in our free webinar series for nonprofit organizations. And I'm really excited to start with a territorial acknowledgement because we are living, playing, and working with gratitude on the unceded territories here in the Vancouver area of British Columbia, Canada. So for those who don't know this area, the people that live here, the Indigenous people are the Squamish, Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and in particular, I live on the Kakite Nation's land. And we always start by acknowledging that we are here and we are guests of this territory, especially in this day and age when it's so important to recognize just the importance of Indigenous people and cultures, and we would like to be inclusive. So we're starting off our inclusion today with that message. If you'd like, you can also share in the chat where you're calling in from today. You don't have to, it's totally optional, but it's nice to know if we have people from down south. I know we have people from across Canada, so thanks for joining and welcome to the community. Today, I'm really very honored to welcome Shawn Raible. I'm going to do a quick introduction. I don't usually talk about myself, but just so you know, I'm the CEO and founder of Leah Chang Learning, and we are an organization that works with nonprofits and cause-driven organizations primarily. Shawn is a fantastic HR consultant with not only experience in the rewards and compensation, the total rewards world, but he also does a lot of work with nonprofits, especially related to mental health, diversity, and inclusion. And he has a lot of tips and experience to share with us today. So thanks for joining us, Shawn. I know that your work with the Variety Children's Charity in BC and the McLaren House have been really impactful. So looking forward to hearing some of your case studies and some of your lived experience as well. So thank you in advance for sharing. And I just want to mention today is sort of a webinar format. I know we're all getting used to Zoom and the various different ways and versions that we can engage online. So just to remind you that you're on mute today, your video will be off, but there's lots of ways for you to participate. We've got some chats going on. Please you're welcome to email or chat with us directly, the panelists. We have Raquel today who's moderating. So Raquel will be the real live person on the other end. If you have any technical difficulties, you're welcome to chat with her. We will also have some polls. We're going to go pretty fast, so make sure you're ready to vote in those polls. And if you're shy, no worries. Just a reminder, the chat is not anonymous, so if you would like to respond anonymously, you can do so in the polls, or you're welcome to email either of us after the session. We'd love to connect with you. So thanks to those joining from all over North America today. I can see you saying hi in the chat. That's really nice. Okay, a few words. We have a wonderful sponsor, Learn Upon, who is my LMS of choice. And for those new to the learning jargon and lingo, an LMS is a learning management system. So Learn Upon has very generously supported this webinar series. And again, this is number 2. We're going to have a few more in the next couple months. And thanks to Learn Upon, we're able to offer this for free. I'd like to actually share a few words about why I'm spending time talking about Learn Upon in this webinar. It's really important for me to share that this is the learning management system we use. And part of the work that we do in our team is we work with organizations to help set them up for online learning success. And what that means is using online systems. And Learn Upon is one of those very rare LMSs that actually does all the things that I look for in a system to pair with organizations such as provincial nonprofits, national nonprofits, large charities, or even small organizations. And the reason being is they have these really cool portals. So this is an example of the portal I use. I also share this portal with other clients and small organizations who maybe wouldn't have access to such a robust professional system on their own. And not only can I share portals and brand it and we can help administer it, but it's also one of the most user-friendly platforms out there. So not just for me as an administrator or as an instructor, but also for the users. And we have all sorts of people using our platform with great success. It's very powerful, super scalable. You can use it for a few up to thousands of users, especially for those nonprofits that have public or that have open-ended learning sort of mandates. And I have to say, they're wonderful people at Learn Upon. They're real people, they get it, they have amazing customer support, and the onboarding process is one of the best I've experienced. And I've experienced quite a few, having supported nonprofit organizations with, just vetting learning management system vendors. So that's it for me. I just want to shout out to our sponsor. And I'm going to move on if I can. Here we go. The reason we offer these free webinar series, and this is really important to me, my personal work in our organization, I know Shawn's as well, is we want to support nonprofits to keep doing what they're doing with even more success, to keep that important work going, especially right now. So I would just want to acknowledge you taking time out of your day to join this webinar or watch the recording if you're watching after the fact. And the reason that this is passionate work for us, especially on my team, is that learning is important for all levels of the organization. I'm a volunteer. I used to be an employee of nonprofits. I am sometimes off and on a board member. I get it. I've always wanted to have access to this kind of learning. And so this is my way of giving back to the community. So we have to support internally so that we can continue our external missions. And I hope to bring you a bit more confidence, a few more tangible tools, and some evidence-based strategies to do your work even better. So on that note, let's do a quick poll, and then I'm going to pass it over to Shawn. So Raquel, do you want to launch that first poll for us? And we're going to go pretty quickly, so get ready to vote. I'm totally curious. Have you ever, doesn't matter when, have you engaged in any workplace activity that involves mental health supports with any of these audiences? So when we talk about nonprofits, we're talking not only about employees and volunteers, but board members, leaders, executive directors. Maybe you're just a nonprofit of one, and that's okay. Stakeholders, or maybe donors and funders and other partner organizations. Or if there's a group I haven't included here, please let us know in the chat. Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds to vote. And yeah, looks like most people have voted. Okay, why don't we end the poll and let's share the results with everybody. Oh, okay, great. I'm so happy to see all of these numbers for employees and leaders and managers too. Have any comments here, Shawn, you want to add?
No, it's great to see the variety. So beyond employees, so that's great to see. Some are looking at donors and partner organizations. So yeah, that's great.
Awesome. God, that's great. So our goal today is to encourage you to think broadly across your organization, and this is one question to help get you thinking about that. Someone mentioned another group, clients. Yes, absolutely. That's fantastic. Of course, lots of organizations out there have a mental health mandate for the public. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, well, let's move on and keep those questions in mind as we go forward. I'm just going to close that. Okay, today's objectives, because we want to be really clear and we want you to walk away with something tangible, is we are, with this series, providing human resources and what we call learning and development supports. A lot of organizations don't have an HR team. Most organizations don't have a learning professional or a learning team, and that's why consultants like us can play a role in supporting your mandate. So today we're going to talk about why mental health is important. That one's pretty obvious, but we're going to cover it anyway. It's a crucial step. And number three is the most important. How do we support our nonprofit teams? And by the end, you'll have some actionable takeaways you can try. So I'm going to pass it to Shawn, and we're going to start with a little disclaimer because we got to do that, right?
Of course, yeah. So thank you, Leah, and thanks everybody for joining and taking time on this important topic. So I'm Shawn, but the disclaimer first is to, we're not medical professionals, cannot give medical advice. So when it comes to talking about mental health, mental illness, when you get into the more specifics, speaking with healthcare providers or licensed professionals. So we're coming from a learning and HR perspective and just want to call that out as we get into a little more content today. All right, I'm going to the next slide. One sec. All right, there we go. All right, so just a little bit about me. So you kind of heard briefly earlier, but so I'm Shawn. I've been in HR Total Rewards for about 20 years. Started my own consulting practice about a year ago. This is little Shawn. He's about 4 years old. And I share the story in a lot of different forums, conferences and podcasts and in the last year or so. part of my story is I do have lived experience. And so with depression and suicidal thoughts, probably about 14 years ago. And it was a manager that noticed kind of a shift in something. She noticed that there was a shift in my behavior and how I showed up in the workplace, and took me aside. And the 40-year-old plus a few years to the 40-year-old would say that, Shawn, you're going to go through some tough times, some good times. Most people saw me as happy-go-lucky, smiling kid, and through adulthood. But one of the things that there are things that happen in our lives that we just can't seem to figure out how to control and get our head around. I worked in HR. There's a lot of stigma around mental health. And so I think what's really important, and we know this, but we're seeing this even more now with COVID and the pandemic, is people are talking about mental health, which is great. So part of my story is that I look at the work and everything that I've been doing, not just from, being in HR, and this is how we look at well-being in an organization and mental health, but also from lived experience. What does that really feel like when it comes down to that employee or their family member that's struggling? How do we reduce stigma and not just train, but also look at things from different angles to ensure that that employee gets all the support that they need, or their family member? And so I really want to encourage, this is really important that we start sharing our stories, and the more people that get out and start talking about this stuff, it does help, right? But it's not all we can do, but it's definitely an important part of it. Go on to the next slide. And hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm just checking audio, let Leah know. So just a grounding slide, and you can use this with your own organizations, but I always like to make sure we start with what is mental health versus mental illness, because sometimes these words get thrown around, and we want to make sure we're really clear about all of us have mental health. Have good days, well, bad days, but mental illness, whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, etc., and how those things are managed. So you basically have this kind of quadrant, and really as an example, if somebody's dealing with bipolar, but they've got all the treatment and supports around it, they could have a good mental health, but they do have a serious mental illness, but they're managing that, right? And so really understand that mental illness is different than mental health. And there's different, obviously, combinations of things that can happen. So I may not have a mental illness, but I go up and down maybe on my mental health stream. Or if I'm dealing with schizophrenia, bipolar, any kind of substance abuse, how am I treating that as well, right? So really just making sure, this is a great kind of visual of that. And I like to use that with organizations when I'm training managers or employees. Just wanted to give the context of when we say mental health versus illness. Okay, so why does it matter? So you're here because you probably know that it matters, and we're hearing more and more about it on, on the news and whatnot. So let's just anchor ourselves in some of the stats, which are really important as we're looking for sponsorship and support from board members or whatnot, or from management, depending on where you are in your organization, how small or large it is. But just getting our heads around, that 1 in 5, Canadians will experience some type of mental health problem or illness each year. So how many of your team would struggle? So you just look at those numbers alone. This one's staggering, and I always come back to this one, that 2 out of 3 will not access the help they need. 2 out of 3 of those folks will not access. That's massive. So they may say that are aware that they have something that they want to deal with, but 2 out of 3 are not actually getting the help. So if people ask for help, would they know where to go? Do people are people afraid to ask for help? Is there stigma about how it may impact their career, or they don't want to be judged? And so that's where, how do you get stuff out in a way that we're talking about this on a regular basis? There's resources, there's support. How can they stay anonymous, right? So really important that we think about the 2 or 3 are not even getting the help they need. And another one that I would like to talk about is, absenteeism and disability costs. But the #1 primary cost for disability is related to mental health. That's the primary. You could have other conditions leading to disability, that like a physical injury, but also mental health could be a secondary piece of it. So really understanding that, how does poor mental health impact your organization? Some of these are there's lots more stats. I source some of the sites we use in Canada. The US has very similar national mental health associations, but really understanding the impact of this and why it matters. And it's just good business, of course, and good for all organizations, nonprofit included, to really thinking about, how is this showing up in your organization? Go to the next slide. And so these are kind of the main categories. We think about absenteeism, right? And so productivity impacts, the reputation for your organization, the costs, and the legal risks. So, if you have employees, what's our duty to accommodate, our duty to inquire, what are the costs with these things in terms of, if you do have benefit plans, what are the costs associated with drug costs for depression. It could be your number 1 or 2 drug. Reputation when it comes to how do you present yourself to your employees and to future employees or to your constituents when it comes to mental health. It's all part of the system. And, obviously absenteeism, productivity, really, people are coming to work, but maybe they're not present, right? So that impacts their productivity. So those are kind of the main categories that you'll see referenced, but we wanted to just anchor to that. Go to the next slide. So there was a study done just a few months ago, and just with COVID, and we want to recognize and acknowledge that more people are more exhausted and anxious than ever. And so they interviewed a couple thousand employees around the world just to get a sense how people are feeling. More than half are more exhausted, no surprise, than before the COVID pandemic. And so you can see that people had a chance to respond more than once. So sadness, irritable, confusion, insomnia, lack of sleep, huge. And so when we just acknowledge and share this stuff with our employees and with those we're working with, that we're not alone, right? We are part of a large community. We are all dealing with stuff, that we can't make assumptions about how other people are dealing with the COVID pandemic and our journey on that. So maybe we were okay for the first month, but the second month, not so good. And now we're going into 6 months. So everybody's journey on how they process and deal with this, everybody's home life is different. So not making assumptions, staying curious, and we're all in this together, but really just an important slide that kind of really talks about almost the global community that we're part of dealing with this this challenge with COVID. Go to the next slide. Thanks. So just a quick poll. How recently have you checked in with your team about mental health? So we just want to get a sense of we're going to pull the poll up here. We'll give you a brief little moment or two to answer. So how recently have you checked in with your team about their mental health? This week, last month, last year? Can't remember. Or if there's another frequency you want to send a comment in, but just going to get a sense of how recent have you checked in?
And again, this is anonymous, so please be honest. We're just here to sort of gauge where everyone's at, and it's okay if you can't remember. It's okay if you haven't done it before. That's why we're here talking about it today.
Yeah.
All right. I think we can see most people have voted. Maybe a couple more seconds. Let's try and get a few more people, including themselves. Is that okay? Yeah. All right. Why don't we end the poll and let's see what the results are.
Okay, last month is the highest, yeah. Last week, yeah. So thank you for those that participated. Yeah, it's a personal question, so we appreciate those that wanted to share. But it's got to be something that's, and we'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about kind of, again, we don't have a lot of time today, but we want to give you as much value as possible in this 30-minute free webinar. So we're going to go through some stuff. But again, as I said earlier, we're available. You can reach out to us if you have questions or follow-up, right? So remote teams. So I've led remote teams in different places, and one of the key things, and it comes to surface, and we do this with teaching our clients is how do you check in, right? So saying in a regular short check-in or survey, that allowing video on or off, right? Now everybody was you have to have the video on, you have to have the video on. Allowing that they could have the video off sometimes. So that sometimes creates stress for people. Doing these walks and virtual chats. So maybe you can't be in the same office, but getting on your headsets and walking wherever you are, your home is, and just having those virtual chats, talking about how are you doing. So we create time to talk about the work that we have to do, the deliverables, but you also want to create time for those personal check-ins because you're not in the same maybe work location anymore. So those kind of walk and virtual chats, grab your coffee and just check in. And this can be done, manager with employees, or just encouraging that for employees with their peers, just to have that contact. Again, staying curious, the curious mindset, no assumptions. So talking about curiosity, asking questions, not making assumptions about somebody else's home life or how they're set up and how they're managing being remote. But also we have things to get done, right? We have to deliver, we got to get our donor grants in, et cetera, et cetera. So being clear on expectations and timelines and priorities, and just being almost, especially in the remote space now, being even more clear to that. Okay, even being more clear about the expectations, the timelines, the priorities, when to ask for help, super important, especially in the remote environment that we're all in.
Yeah, maybe I can add a few things too, Shawn, if you don't mind. This is something as a leader and as a board member, I'm really conscious of. Here are some of the things that have worked for me. I try to build in a cadence of checking in. You don't have to be so formal as making sure you've connected with everybody, but I really want to. Board members need to check in with each other as well. For example, the board that I'm on is, we've gone through some hard times. We are feeling sometimes demoralized or deflated. We're not sure, the new direction we'll take, especially with COVID. So calling on our peers or checking in with each other is equally as important as checking in with our teams or people who are volunteering employees, what have you. So one thing I've really enjoyed doing is taking sort of designating which channel and which technology we use for that type of stuff. So for example, my team uses Slack. You can use any other tool you like, but Slack is a free tool that we use just to check out and hang out with each other and send each other cat videos, whatever we need to support each other. And of course, that is as important as the work we're doing, which we do on other channels. So anyway, just sharing some tips with the group. I'm sure you have lots that work for you. Feel free to enter those in the chat and share with others today. Should I move to the next one, Shawn?
Yeah, let's just for time. Yeah, we're just gonna. So, part of, in preparing for today was really putting the nonprofit, hat. I work with a lot of different organizations. I volunteer with Variety. I used to be on the board for McLaren Housing Society in BC for 7 years and helping with the HR committee. And really thinking about it, saying, and doing some research, looking at the Charity Village. If you've heard of Charity Village, there's some great, some content there. But the fueled by the mission, right? Why people join nonprofits and stay is they're fueled, but there's people that go above and beyond. They're working long hours, so that can, they're just, which is great. You want those people to come and stay, but sometimes they go to the extra mile, and sometimes that they create burnout, right? There's gonna be limiting funding and resources, of course. Internal conflict or frustrations amongst peers or with board up and down, or with constituents. So those things obviously exist. And then this was a unique one, I thought, just to call out, there's a higher percent of individuals in nonprofits that have personal trauma. Those that are dealing and have gone through, or maybe a family member or a friend, are drawn to nonprofits to be part of that mission to support. And so there may be, in the nonprofit world, a higher percent of individuals that have gone through some type of personal trauma. And then there could be triggers as they're working with clients and doing the great work for themselves. And so just really being mindful of your organization and the makeup and the support systems that are there. Because when we talk about things in depression or suicidal thoughts, for me, because I've been there, I always will have that connection and it gets real. And so I really just wanted to call that up, that these are some of the common stressors, but that's really the last one is very specific, and I think something to think about.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's really important to support our organization and perhaps also our clients or customers or constituents who may be also experiencing trauma, and also to avoid any vicarious trauma that goes through that.
Yeah. I see we've got some questions coming in. We'll keep going through content, maybe answer in at the pause here. So one of the things to really think about is that we see mental health and well-being and what you're doing for your organization, wherever you are in that journey, is to think about it as not just one thing that needs to get done off a checklist. One of the things is understanding how it impacts and links to your organizational policies, your programs, diversity and inclusion, say D&I here, or we call it the employee value proposition, the deal, in quote. So the deal really is everything I get for coming to work for your nonprofit. I get a salary, I get some learning development, I get to be part of the mission, I get a great boss. So understanding the deal, talking about what the deal is, but mental health is part of that. All of it connects to how you go to the market to attract employees to your organization, and how you keep and retain, right? And so thinking about all this connection. And obviously all that should link to what your purpose and strategy is for your organization, your reason for being. Okay, so just wanted to just call that out. We'll go to the next slide. We want to make sure we get into some specific supporting tools. And again, I could go on for hours about this stuff, but wanted to give you some of the most salient things, and some stuff you may already have, but it's a good reminder. Some things you may not be doing yet, but you're planning to do it. So let's kind of just cover these two slides on this. So obviously you want to share resources from licensed professionals. So when you do looking at getting to things about depression, substance abuse, eating disorder, if there's content. Now an EAP or EFAP in the US, they generally, if you have benefits and you have those types of services, they're gonna have a lot of content you can share and communicate regularly with your employees. If you don't, you want to be careful what you're sending out and what you're forwarding to your organization. Just really being mindful of using professionals that are licensed to providing content when it comes to those specific topics. Training, of course, we want to talk about training for your employees, for managers, for your leadership board, and for managers, really calling out providing scripts. So one of the things we've been doing, and we'll talk in the case study, is providing scripts. Like, how do I, as a manager, what do I ask? How do I hold space for this? I don't want to get too involved, right? And so script is really important, like what to say, kind of reaction, response. If they react this way, what do I do? If they react this way, what do I do? Help them through that. Benefit programs, where you have them, not everybody does, or lots of different sizes of nonprofits, but these are some really key things to look at around your coverage for clinical counselors versus psychologists. Again, Canada is different than US, but again, these are some high-level topics to really think about is, well, what's your coverage for prescription drugs? What are your sick disability program or claim processes? Like, how does that look and feel with your vendor? How is your EAP program working? There's lots of content material, but a lot of organizations struggle to get that material out in an efficient way on a regular basis to employees. I love this one around performance management. How are you reviewing performance? Not just what they're delivering, but how. Are they doing it respectfully, right? We're trying to reduce, look at how people deliver the work and how they lead teams versus just the what. So that also shifts the culture. I'm trying to create a safe space, right? Let's go to the next slide. And so these are some of the policies and things that really all link to, do you have a policy around diversity and inclusion? Do you have a policy around privacy and confidentiality? Do you have a policy around respect in the workplace, anti-bullying? Attendance and absenteeism policies, right? So making sure in that example, you know, our managers making assumptions about they're not here, so they're not performing, we should terminate, versus maybe there's something going on, right? So all these things do link into a broader kind of mental health well-being strategy and how your organization positions itself. So it's really just not just a training. Training is important. You got to continue to do that and look at how you support your organization, but the policies and how those integrate, the third party, the benefit providers, and how all that works together. These are the things I found through my experience. If you look at those, you also start to shift the support and the experience for your employees. And work safe as well. Your occupational health and safety, those things exist. They're mandated to support your health and safety organization. And so how do you bring mental health, that topic, into those policies, those joint health safety committee meetings, if you've already got meetings and a forum happening? Mm-hmm. And I could go for hours on this stuff, but just to hopefully that plants a few aha moments.
Conversation, isn't it? Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on to a final case study, and then we'll share some stuff from the learning perspective.
Right. Yeah. So this was we did a recent 2 trainings, one for employees, one for managers, with a local BC nonprofit. They really wanted to make sure that we level set the organization, really making sure that how we talk about mental health, what is it, what isn't, what are the support resources available, and then the topics you can see here, the 4-quadrant exercise, which we're going to show you, which is also part of our handout, on how to navigate stressful situations, communication tips, words matter, right? So what words we're using that can create more stress or less stress, remote working tips, of course, self-care, care for others, of course, and those employee scenarios. So, you know, Sally's not joining the Zoom call regularly. How long do I wait before I call HR or call the emergency contact, or what do I do? I see somebody wearing glasses all of a sudden, you know, something going on at home. What do I do? So building in some scenarios and having open dialogue as leaders, as managers, about what we do. So we're all on the same page, the same song sheet when it comes to these more difficult situations. Not that managers have to solve it all, but they need to know what to do and when to escalate, etc. So that's kind of the stuff that we've done in recent times with nonprofits.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I think these case studies are really important to talk about, you know, what you could do in your organization and what the results might be. So maybe you have any other impacts to share in terms of like, what difference did you see this bringing to?
Yeah, the key thing was the feedback was that everybody started to talk about it a bit more. We actually had some real moments with employees just sharing, like, I now feel it's okay to talk about it, right? You had little groups of peers saying, you know what, we're going to talk more regularly. So the behavior shift where people are creating more support for each other. And for managers, they feel more comfortable, less fear of creating space for the conversation, and knowing that they were all aligned of when they would need to get HR involved, how they would do that on a regular basis to create the time. So yeah, it was a real great experience, and to see them take that forward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know we have an activity that we'd like to suggest today. Do you want to walk us through that, Shawn?
Yeah, no problem. So this is the 4-quadrant exercise, and I've used this with my teams. And when there's something stressful going on, whether it's in the workplace, in an organization, or in your personal life, I use this myself. And what this is, when there's so much going on, is to break it down. And I've literally had somebody in my team, we were going through a big transformation that was going on, a big change was happening that would impact her role, and she was in tears. We went through this exercise, and she ended up with smiles and being able to move forward. So the 4-quadrant exercise, it's basically you break everything down and you say, what do I know that's going on? The facts. What am I hearing and seeing? Because as humans, we like to make patterns and assumptions on stuff. So you're really trying to remove that, the assumptions of what you might be hearing versus what are you really hearing? What are you really seeing in terms of the situation, big or small? What are you feeling? So emotions are real. We're human. We're not robots. So honoring our feelings, the impact of what's happening is I feel stressed, anxiety, fear of repercussions or losing my job. What do I need to do, right? What do I need to do? So me, myself, what can I control? I need more information. I need to talk to somebody. I need to seek help. I need more clarity of what really is happening, the impact. And we're going to send out this document. Really, this is just a little bit of the tips of how to fill in these boxes. And what I tell anybody, if you're a manager of people, is you share this on an annual basis at least. Hey, we're talking about all the deliverables for the year, how much we're going to get done, but also how do we work together? How do we support each other? And I share this 4-quadrant. And if I invite individuals that report to me, I can work with them, together through it, or they can do it on their own, and we can look at that. But it's really just providing a very simple way to allow us to really think about what's really going on. How do I get help? And what can I own? Because sometimes we can't control. And getting rid of those assumptions and staying curious about, what really is going on? And does this matter? If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't give it more than 5 minutes. I always say, right? If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't give it more than 5 minutes. So how we process stuff, and this is just something I wanted to share with you, is a practical tool, very simple, but I literally have seen people go from tears, high anxiety, to smiles and understanding what's going on and own their story, their narrative. That's really important in mental health, is that we can do what we can as organizations, but we also need employees to own their experience and ask for help and talk and seek those resources. So there's a marriage of accountabilities between the individual and the organization that we all talk about. And so I think that's important, that we give tools that allow our employees or those volunteers or those we're working with to create a voice, right? And to organize their thoughts. So.
Mm-hmm. And I can add too, having worked with a lot of mental health practitioners, we are not mental health, caregivers ourselves. However, we are specialists in how to coach people towards success. And this activity is really well founded based on, cognitive behavior therapy, based on what we know about how the brain works and how the brain reacts, and how the brain can mislead us, right? So this activity I find really great, just to remind myself, even if I'm doing some self-talk about, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now.
Yeah.
That's a common feeling for me because I'm a high-performing, high-functioning person. I want to do the right thing, but I can acknowledge that feeling. And again, we're bringing in some evidence-based skills such as mindfulness, right? I'm mindful that that's a feeling. I can acknowledge it, but I don't have to act on it. And sometimes focusing on that kernel of truth, okay, what is actually happening? What are the facts? It really helps me identify how to move forward. And I am seeing a huge impact in how I go about my day-to-day, and I'm looking forward to working on this with my team as well. So thanks for coaching us through that, Shawn.
Yeah, no problem. It's allowing ourselves to feel those anxiety things versus pushing them away. There's so much evidence in actually just allowing and processing and then organizing your thoughts as you move forward versus just deflecting that anxiety and stress. So thank you for that. And hopefully this helps folks move forward as well.
I hope so. We're going to just spend a few more minutes on looking from a learning perspective. So as an instructional designer, I'm going to bring forward a couple more strategies you can use. And we'll talk about how does mental health fit into your organization's learning strategy? And I hope you have one. And if not, well, let's chat. So the thought I'd like to share, and thank you, Shawn, for setting a really good base, is that we need to continually be learning about these important things to be able to support them in ourselves and in others. I know that as a lifelong learner myself, I'm always improving how I can be a better person and react differently in different situations. And instead of reacting, perhaps respond better. But it takes practice. And what we know about how the brain learns and the neuroscience behind learning is that we must repeat this often. We're not going to get it right all the time. We have to constantly be learning about it, creating dialogue, supporting each other, and then repeating those good habits. So here are a couple ways you can do that. I want you to think about organizational learning as a little bit bigger than just training. You'll notice instructional designers don't tend to use the word training that much because we're not really sure what it means sometimes, but let me tell you what we see as organizational learning. It's about behavior change. We want people to embrace best practices and practice those and do those things and apply them to their day-to-day. We want them to actively apply whatever it is we're learning about. It's not a one and done kind of thing, especially with mental health. You can't just do 1 hour of training or a webinar, no matter how great the webinar is, but that's not sufficient. We need to be talking about improving performance over time and building capacity in your organization. And we talk a lot about leadership development or leader training, but what about the future leaders? The people who are maybe just junior or starting out or maybe just getting involved as volunteers, they may be the future leaders of your organization. I look at sort of the path that myself and my colleagues have taken. We wanted to get involved. We started as volunteers, and now we're really working with and together with organizations. And boy, I really would have benefited from a bit more support at the beginning. So my focus as a learning consultant is to help organizations build that in through the long term and to sort of avoid the passive learning events and passive learning situations. That is not evidence-based to really show that people can embrace and apply it in their day-to-day. So we want to make learning relevant and be able to apply it right away to the task, the roles, the functions, and the performance that we're looking for in the people that run our organizations. So as a neuroscientist who works with learning professionals, I'm really fascinated by how the brain works, how the brain learns best. And as an educator, we've seen a lot of evidence showing that you can't learn if you're in the fight or flight zone of your brain. So the limbic system is where you're in that survival mode, and that's the mode we're in when we're stressed, when we're experiencing poor mental health. We cannot use our prefrontal cortex, the learning and the thinking brain, that executive functioning. So it's extremely important for us as leaders or supports for organizations to help create that shift from, okay, we cannot constantly be in survival mode. And the last few months, we've all been in survival mode. But to continue learning and supporting our organization, we need to get back to what we call the learning brain, which is getting out of the fight or flight sort of like basic survival brain and moving into the more advanced executive functions. That's where learning happens. That's where lasting behavior change happens. And so from a learning design perspective, this is what we as instructional designers do, which is, you need to build a base of factual knowledge-based knowledge transfer, but we want people to apply it and be able to then take it and use it to evaluate, create programs, lead. And those are the highest, most critically minded tasks a human being can do. So to get into that shift, how can we support people's mental health so that we can get out of that survival brain and back to the learning brain? So here are a few tips that I would share, having seen these and experienced this working with many nonprofits, small, medium, and large. So you need to create a safe space to talk about mental health, but a safe space to learn about mental health. It's very meta, right? I want to just raise a quick note about technology. Holy smokes, have we all learned so much about technology? Like, my mom is on Zoom. Hi, Mom. I love that. It is also extremely stressful. There's a lot of pressure for people to get up to speed really fast. And it's exciting to see how we're all embracing digital technology. But let's be patient with each other. Make sure you're taking time in your meetings, in your team gatherings, in your board meetings, just to acknowledge that, wow, we have come a long way. or maybe use that as a learning space to share tips and make sure people feel safe, and that they're open to it. So in terms of shifting to the learning brain, asking for consent is also a really great way, or asking people to stay and be curious. For example, would you like some tips? Would you consider having a few tips on learning more about this technology? Another thing is support documenting as many things as you can. For example, like nonprofits are shifting really quickly nowadays. Take a second to write things down. Those tips, those functions, those checklists, those are really important training materials or learning materials, and they will help you as you move forward. And I'll talk about that in a second, because learning doesn't just happen once, right? You want to continually support it. Make sure you're providing peer-to-peer support, and that's one way that we integrate social learning. So I have that in bold here, because social learning is in parallel with formal on-the-job learning. It's a way for people to talk about and connect with the content of whatever the learning is. And with mental health, it's especially important. So make sure that people can talk about it between themselves. And then, of course, repeat often, because we know that the brain needs time and practice to create stronger mental connections. So quick last poll. We're gonna just take a few more minutes. We're gonna end at 11:15 today, but Raquel, do you mind launching that for us? Where does mental health fit into your organizational learning? So a couple of the answers we have are, is it part of onboarding? If so, check that off. But it might also appear in other areas. So check all that apply here. We've got recurring team meetings or retreats or conferences, perhaps in your performance review. It's part of your leadership development or leadership program or training, or whatever you call it. It could be in something else. Maybe you have something that we haven't listed here. Please let us know in the chat. If you're not sure, that's okay. We encourage you to find out. And then let's be honest, and you can be in this poll, it's completely anonymous. Maybe it doesn't fit right now into your organization's learning strategy. Perhaps you don't really know if you have a learning strategy yet, and perhaps you're not there yet, and that's okay. And that's why we're here today. We're hoping to encourage more of that discussion. So thanks for voting. Why don't we show the results? Thank you. And that's great. I love to see the onboarding performance review is really strong. I love that it's in recurring retreats or meetings or conferences. I mean, we're not really doing in-person conferences right now, of course, but yeah, build those in wherever you can. And then what else did we have in the chat? Let me just take a quick peek here. We have some people who said other. Staff meetings. Yeah, awesome. That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to just close that and move to the next slide and just share with you from a learning perspective. And again, this is like much bigger picture. We want to embrace adding something as important as mental health into every aspect of the learning in your organization. So just like Shawn said earlier, mental health needs to be part of your whole organizational big picture. It's not just about you know, your organizational strategic plan. It's not just about your employee policies. And it should be about all of those things, including how you deliver your services and your programs to your constituents. So for example, in onboarding, create the space, set the stage to create that culture. Over time, new people coming into the organization will reinforce that. As people are learning, growing, and performing their roles, especially before a big project, big deadlines, make sure you're creating that space, refresh their learning. Hey, remember we talked about this when you joined the organization? Or you've been here a long time, but this is something that we want to do you know, often. And just a reminder that we want to make sure that we're checking in with each other and that you have the mental support you need to get into your learning brain, because people can't do their best work when they're in survival mode. Of course, when they become leaders, they need extra supports, they need different scripts, they need very different actions and outcomes so they can lead their teams. They need their own confidence to do that. And then of course, people move on from the organization. How are they leaving your organization in a better, more developed, more evolved way? And how do they take that message and continue being an ambassador for your organization when and if they do leave? Because they will, you know, organizations change and evolve. So just a really quick summary. We know from neuroscience that we need to repeat learning often. There is evidence showing that we actually need to reset what is called the forgetting curve. And as we know from neuroplasticity, our brain needs to use it, otherwise we lose it. So that's why I keep saying repeat, repeat. We do strengthen things over time. And so be patient, celebrate the small wins, acknowledge, be mindful of people's progress over time. And I really recommend any sort of cognitive behavioral therapy that involves learning how your brain works and learning when and when not to trust it, because we can sometimes get it wrong, right? And so learning the difference between emotions and actions. So having done cognitive behavior therapy myself, it changed my life. So just wanted to throw that out there as a recommendation. I do have 2 more case studies. Should I explain them? Should we end now? Maybe it's worthwhile just for those who are watching the recording. So if you need to leave, that's fine. We're just going to run through 2 quick case studies. But this is the logistics of how do you roll out an organization-wide mental health program. So one of the former organizations I was with was provincial. It was sort of a regulatory body, sort of government organization. They had about 350 employees, and we did an organization-wide rollout of resiliency training. And what we did is we looked at training trainers internally. So we first started with internal facilitators, and then we next rolled it out to the leaders. It's usually important to start with the leaders. Then it was current employees, so everyone was invited to take the training and the learning experience, and then ongoing. Sometimes number 4 is forgotten. So what that looked like is we would have ongoing sessions or ongoing offerings for anyone new coming in, anyone new or anyone current who wanted to refresh, and also people who might have missed the first wave of rollout. So in a large organization like this, logistics about how to actually keep something like resiliency, repeating often so that you're building those neural pathways. One other way to do it that we did was we made sure we integrated it across all learning and operational events. So town halls, strategic meetings, leaders meetings, team meetings. We made sure that everyone had it on their agenda to talk about resiliency, to reinforce skills, to remind people, and to check in. So make sure that it's an organizational wide mandate. The second case study, and the last one, is my team was brought in to do a constituent relationship management implementation. So very techie stuff, you're talking about databases, and it was a small team, 5 part-time employees. It was a municipal, local organization. A new database was it was a huge cognitive leap, right? So there was very low digital confidence and very low sort of skills base that we had to bring up to speed, right? And so what we did is we, from the start, knew that we needed to make the time and create the safe space for learning and to really meet people where they were at. And to do that, this organization needed to have funding for people to come in to do these workshop sessions, which could also be done remotely. And so we obtained a digital skills adoption grant, which was enabled us to really just spend that time together and compensate employees for their time to be trained, which is also important, right? And then in those team learning sessions, we were able to face, acknowledge, and then overcome the anxiety everyone was feeling about, like, what is this new system? I don't know how to use it. I don't even know what it's for. How is this going to change my work? And by the end of our program, we strengthened not only people's digital skills, but we strengthened the team as a whole, and even operationally strengthened and identified and clarified what people's roles were evolving to become with this new digital world. So in conclusion, I'm hoping you can see the value of working with consultants like Shawn, working with learning consultants like myself or my colleagues, or perhaps reaching out to a combination of HR, organizational development, and learning specialists, because we can support you specifically with your nonprofit needs. I don't know if, Shawn, you have anything you'd like to add here, but It's nonprofits have very unique needs, and sometimes they're not always met with certain vendors. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's been a pleasure to be part of this. And I think, yeah, understand the unique kind of environment for nonprofits, as kind of called out earlier, and really thinking about the folks that we're interacting with as nonprofits, through donors or to our clients, and what they may be experiencing as well. And so how do we ensure those that are interacting with the public, interacting with those that are benefiting from our nonprofits, we understand that they're also going through their own situations. So just stay strong and stay curious, and that it's not a quick fix, right? But it's about opening up the dialogue and sharing our resources and tips with each other, right? We're one community. So.
Yeah, thank you for those ending words. And just to summarize, here are the things we really hope you can take away and take forward to your organization. Support your people, especially now. We all acknowledge the crazy times we're going through right now. It is unprecedented. It is something global, and it's an exciting space for change as well. Check in often with your team. If you need supports, use the 4 quadrants. Do it offline or do it in other digital formats. Whatever works for you and your team. Build mental health not only into your overall organizational strategies and policies, but into every single phase of person's career or person's involvement with your organization. Repeat it often. Build those strong neural pathways, and then reach out for help. There's lots of us consultants out there who love working and only work with nonprofits. And speaking of which, one thing that I can offer, which is a low-cost, high-impact way of training your employees. The middle one is for Canadians specifically, but the outside 2 are for any audience. But these are some bite-sized e-learning courses specific to nonprofits who want more support with digital programming. Like, how do we fundraise? Are we allowed to email people? And then are we meeting our goals? Because we've had to shift, what does that look like now? So please visit my website if you want to take some courses. Lots of testimonials have said this is a really helpful resource for you. Shawn, can people email you, connect with you offline?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well, or just email me there directly. It's great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please stay in touch with us. We're very active on LinkedIn. You can email, I'm on Twitter as well. And I hope you can join our next in our series, our next webinar, a free webinar with Katerina Moreno. She's an HR consultant. I met her through a really strong meetup group that supports nonprofits and technology. She's really smart, great to talk to. Hope you'll join us October 22nd. Thanks again to our sponsor, LearnUpon. Thank you, Shawn, for sharing your advice, your expertise, and of course, your story.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.